I wonder why nothing exciting ever happens around here.
So I recently purchased this golf ball sized piece of aquamarine. The price was great, and although there are some internal veils and clouds, I don't see a whole lot of fractures internally, so I couldn't resist buying this large piece of aquamarine. In my view, there are 3 different areas that you have to master if you want to become a successful gem cutter. Of course, you have to learn to facet well, but you also have to learn to master the art of evaluating gemstone rough, and finally, you also have to learn to sell what you cut, unless you just want to keep everything you cut for yourself or give your gems to friends and family. So, in my view, you need to do all 3 as a gem cutter. Let's talk about evaluating rough. When evaluating rough to potentially purchase, you have to consider color, clarity, size, shape of the rough, and of course the price of the rough, and of course you need to have some idea of what you can sell the cut stone for. When I discovered this piece of aquamarine, I noted that the clarity is not internally flawless, but it's not too bad, as there are few fractures. Mostly what I see internally are some veils. So the color is good. Often you'll come across rough dealers trying to sell you colorless beryl, claiming it to be aquamarine. No, colorless beryl is goshenite, not aquamarine. But that's not the issue here. This color of the rough is okay. So next, I evaluated the shape of the rough, which is great, as it's pretty much already in a hexagonal shape and has plenty of depth. So sometimes you'll find a big piece of gem rough which is flat as a pancake, and that's a problem. That's not the case here. So of course I considered the size of the rough, which is incredible, so that only kind of left the price. Now I did have to spend a few days negotiating with the seller, because the seller was also negotiating with a Chilean cutter, but in the end we agreed on what I considered to be an awesome price, and so I bought and imported this beautiful aquamarine rough, and now I'm ready to pick a design to cut. So let's find a unique design that will produce a beautiful one-of-a-kind gemstone. For this piece of aquamarine, I obviously want a hexagonal design based on the shape of the rough. And I want it to be a brilliant design, not a step cut design, as a brilliant design will mix everything together inside the stone and bounce back a brilliant stone. It may even hide some of the veils. So now if you recall, I recently cut a huge piece of ametrine, also using a hexagonal design. Now for that ametrine, I wanted to keep the colors separated. I did not want them mixed based on it being ametrine. So I did not want a brilliant design in that case, but in this case I do. So I found this design called Conquest Ablaze on the gemologyproject.com website. This is one of Arya Akvan's designs, and every design by Arya which I have cut have turned out great for me, so I'll give this design a shot. Now I did make some minor adjustments to this design for aquamarine, and I'll explain how I did that. First I ran Arya's design through my GemCut Studio or GCF software using the tilt performance feature to predict how brilliant the design would be. It cuts a brilliant stone at about 80% brilliance at the 0 degree tilt, which means you're looking straight down at the gemstone in your hand. So this is an excellent design, but the question is, how will it perform for aquamarine, which has a different refractive index than this design was originally made for. Using GCS, we can change the refractive index of the design of Aquamarine and rerun the tilt performance to see how our gemstone will perform with this design. Now GCS predicts we will lose about 10% of our brilliance by cutting this design as is on Aquamarine rough. But 70% brilliance is still good. Now GCS has a feature called the manual optimizer where you can test out minor tweaks on the cutting angles of the crown or the pavilion to try to improve the brilliance of your stone. The manual optimizer shows us a number of options we can test out. Our current design is always the center stone on the display. So first, I'll test increasing the angles on the crown by selecting the stone above ours. And I see the performance is about the same. Next, I'll test decreasing the angles in the pavilion by selecting the stone next to our stone. In this case, the performance is not as good as our current design. Next, I'll test out increasing the angles of the pavilion by selecting the stone to the right of ours. The performance is terrible. We definitely do not want to do that. Finally, I'll test out decreasing the angles of the crown by selecting the stone directly below ours. And wow, the performance increases. So I will click accept and GCS will make the minor adjustments to the crown facets of our original design and we will be ready to cut our gemstone. I made a number of videos on how to use GCS and I even created a YouTube playlist called Gem Cut Studio Tutorials where I put all of my GCS videos as well as any other GCS tutorial videos by other cutters. I put it all together in this playlist in one convenient place for anyone to use. So here's a link to that playlist if you want to get a detailed explanation of using GCS.
Okay, we're ready to put my next stone that I'm going to cut into onto the DOP, and this is Aquamarine, and I've got a hexagonal design. The large ametrine that I cut previously and made a video of previously was, this is larger. This is almost 400 carats, pretty much golf ball sized almost. So I'm going to cut off a piece and make it a hexagonal design. I could have made it kind of an exaggerated hex design, and my wife BOPIE discussed that with me. She thought it would look good, but I decided no, I want to do a standard hex design, kind of a brilliant cut, not a step cut like I did with ametrine, and see how that turns out. So let me go ahead and I'm going to use my rougher lap and rough up this flat part for the crown and then attach the stone to the DOP. And for a stone this size, I'm going to use my 2-part epoxy. For anything smaller, I generally use my Helios super glue, light cure super glue, which bonds in 3 seconds with UV light. But in this case, I'm going to use my 2-part epoxy and let it dry overnight. I've got another project that I'm working on that I will work on. Won't make a video of, and that's this lab created ruby, which I have a ring for that it's got to fit in. So I've got to cut an oval, and I'll work on that while my aquamarine, I call it chili pepper, my chili pepper stone is done, because I saw the stone for sale the same time a Chilean cutter from Chile saw it, so we had to arm wrestle for it. It's a nice stone, and let's get to work on getting it on a DOP. Okay, I took my Sharpie and kind of drew with a bottle cap the outline of where stone is, and I'm going to use this DOP that I got from Wyatt Yeager. It's an amazing DOP. I'm going to use that to help center the stone, so I'll put it in there and center it in my transfer fixture, get the stone centered up with this large DOP, and then once the stone is centered, I'll switch to this DOP, much smaller DOP, but I don't want to try to center it with this dop because there's too much of a chance of it not being centered and I'll lose a lot of rough. So the other issue that I have because the stone is so large is generally my transfer fixtures from Ultratech aren't big enough. So I've got one other transfer fixture that I don't use that often, but it's for big honking stones. It's this one. It's a basic, pretty basic transfer fixture I picked up a few years ago, and it'll take care of pretty much anything this big, so it'll work. So that's the transfer fixture that I'll use. And Wyatt Yeager is he's the admin person for the Faceting machines, buy and sell, and pretty good guy to know. Certainly he makes the Faceting machine, Facetron machine, and he keeps on his website, he keeps the prices of pretty much every used machine that's bought and sold. He tries to keep up with that. So if you want to know the prices, the going prices for used machines, he's the one that tracks it. So he also manufactures the facets. So it's the facets and the Facetron, both Wyatt Yeager. So on Facebook, I'd recommend you get to know Wyatt. He's a great guy to know, and he makes stops. And again, you're not going to find this stop anywhere else. So let me set the two-part epoxy for this large stone. I'm going to use a business card and my two-part epoxy. I use just regular DevCon two-part epoxy. So let me set that in my on my business card. So I've got our dops, our large dop. I've used that to center the stone where I need it. And so now what I do is remove the large dop and swap out the smaller one. So the smaller dop is now centered. And so now I'll go ahead and use my two-part epoxy. So again, I just make 2 puddles of the epoxy. You don't have to worry about bubbles. That doesn't affect your two-part epoxy. And you don't have to worry about getting exact. You want a 50-50 mix, but you don't need an exact. A lot of people have, some people have said, hey, we come up with ideas. They presented to me as ways to measure your epoxy, different ideas, and you guys are overthinking it. So it's not that important to be perfect, okay? Close enough is close enough. So just make a puddle and then take your other, in this case the hardener, the other two-part epoxy, and next to it you make another puddle. You have about 2 minutes once you start mixing the 2 parts together, but when they're separated it's no problem. So just push out enough so that you have 2 equal puddles. And I'm probably going to have too much, but I'd rather have too much than too little. And that's about 2 puddles the same size. So now we'll mix them together. And I just use a bamboo skewer. You can use anything. I get bamboo skewers from the grocery store. So now I'm just going to put the epoxy on the bottom part of my dop and up the dop. Okay, and now I'll just turn the transfer fixture over a few times, let gravity move the epoxy around a little bit, and then take care of it. Also, I use a rubber band to hold the everything together a little bit, put some pressure to hold it together. So just turn it over a few times, and you want the epoxy to run down the dop a little bit. You don't want it going all the way down. So I'll just keep moving the transfer fixture around for a couple of minutes. It'll set up in about 2 or 3 minutes, and I don't have to do that anymore. Okay, I've got this monster of an aquamarine. I'm putting it into the spindle of my gem cutting machine. So I put the dop in, and then I just tighten up this dop retention screw to hold the dop in place. And I orient it so that the hexagonal facets, there's one at the 48 tooth and one at the 96 tooth. We're going to cut off quite a bit of, or at least a piece of this top part, probably like that. So as this gets faceted, because all the hexagonals facets are all symmetric, same distance apart, and it gets a little bit rounded in this design that I've picked that I'm looking forward to cutting. So and it's a very big stone, almost like a golf ball. So let's get to cut and see what it looks like. Now I am going to use a 320 grit topper lap to preform, because I have a lot of material to move, and topper laps are kind of, to me, just disposable laps. Any brand is fine. I get them wherever, Amazon, eBay. They're just a thin lap impregnated with the right grit that you want, in this case 320 grit. Some people prefer some brands and they say they don't wobble. Whatever, they do. They all wobble a little bit because they're just a thin lap. You put it on your a master lap and tighten it down to hold it in place. I wouldn't use them above the 600 level grit, but at 320 grit level they're fine. Other facets use finer toppers. They use 600 and even beyond that, but that's up to them. I'll just use the 320. Again, I wouldn't use more than 600 with a topper. Okay, I've preformed my aquamarine, just cutting the first row facets that go into the center point. There's another row that goes to a center point, and then the first girdle facets, there's another set of girdle facets that'll kind of make this less of a pronounced hexagon, kind of round it out a little bit. But I came to a cullet, so this is as big as the stone I can do. So there's still some issues right here. So I could either bring the top down or bring the stone in and make it a little smaller. Some of this will get cleaned up when I add the next row of facets and the girdle facet, get rid of some of that. But you got to leave enough space here to work on the upper half of the stone. And the way you determine if there's enough space is you take your width measurement, measure the width, and then there's a calculation in your diagram called the C to W ratio, C/W, which in this case is, for this diagram, is 0.205. So you take the width and you multiply it by 0.205. So the width of the stone is almost 34 millimeters. It's a whopper. So you take 34 and multiply that by the C to W ratio of 0.205, and that gives you 6.97. Now you got to add the girdle, and it's not going to be bigger than 0.5 millimeters. So about 7.5 millimeters is needed for the bottom half. So you set your calipers to 7.5, and then you see if you've got enough space. And that's how much I need for the top. So I could cut down the top down to about there. And that would take care of a lot of this nasty part here. But again, when I add the next row of facets and the next row of girdles, that's also going to take care of some of this. So I'm sitting pretty good. I've got to bring it in a little bit for this one as well, but coming down, yeah, I'm going to have to cut in a little bit. So I'm going to probably have to make it a little bit smaller, but like I said, it's a whopper, so bringing it in a little bit is not a problem. So I did use my, I was using the 320 topper on the stone, but that was cutting really slow. My 320 is kind of worn, almost ready to throw it out and get another one. So I went to my 240 grit topper. That made quicker work of it. I don't have any problem using a 200 grit on this stone. I do worry when I get down to the 100 grit, and certainly not below 100 grit, because it'll cause subsurface damage. And but I have seen other cutters use 100 grit, and they claim it doesn't bother barrel, so I'm sure my 220 wasn't a problem, but I haven't gone to 100 grit. So now I'll probably switch to a little finer grit of a lap and continue working on my preforming our stone. Coming along nicely, and it's going to be a whopper. Okay, I've got over the first tier, the P1 facets with 3000 grit diamond on a bat lap, and prior to that, these are 600 grit facets used with the 600 grit. Not my 600 grit sintered. I was using a 600 grit topper lap. And the reason is my sintered these are very big facets, and the sintered was getting the job done, but it was slow. So I went back to the topper, which is a little rougher. Sintered lap would make it finer even at the same 600 grit compared to a 600 grit topper. So now I'll go over the second tier, the P2 facets. And I haven't done the P3 or the P4 facets yet, which will come down. I didn't want to do those with a rougher lap. I'll do those with my 3000 grit diamond on the bat lap, and then of course I'll do the girdle facets. But it's coming along nicely. It's starting to brighten right up. So I'll continue to work on this gigantic Aquamarine. Okay, there's 2 rows around the girdle, and I've pre-polished one of the rows with my 3000 grit diamond on a bat lap. You can see the facets that are pre-polished compared to those that aren't. And everything else is pre-polished, except I haven't gone through the P3 and P4 facets yet. I'll get those after I facet the rest, pre-polish the rest of the girdle. So it's coming along nicely, pre-polishing right up, and we're ready to polish this one in no time. So let me continue to pre-polish our big old Aquamarine. Okay, the 3000 grit diamond on a bat lap was the first time I cut the P3 and the P4 facets. These are those little facets right here and here that come down. There's 2 rows, and I would not cut those with anything too rough. You would end up like really overcutting. It's easy to overcut these. So at the 3000 grit diamond pre-polish phase is the first time I addressed these facets. So now everything's polished, pre-polished. I'm ready to polish this up, and I'm thinking normally I would use tin lap and cerium oxide, but I think because these are such large facets, I think I'm going to do better with the ultra laps, Mylar ultra laps, Spectra ultra laps, which is cerium oxide embedded in the Mylar lap. I think that'll do better because I won't have to use my cheater as much. because these are such long facets and large facets, the big stone, I think I'd be using the cheater a lot. So I think I'm going to be better with the Mylar, the Spectra Ultra Lap. So I'm going to give that a try, see how it works. Okay, I ended up using a tin lap with cerium oxide. I tried both that and the Spectrum Ultra Laps. The tin lap worked quicker, faster, better in this case, so I used that one. So I'm ready to transfer the stone and cut the upper half. Normally when I transfer large stones, I use two-part epoxy to adhere the dot to the stone, but in this case, I'm going to use my my UV activated super glue. I've been having luck with that. I've been using it for all the smaller stones, not small, but smaller than this large stone. But also I'm going to, in the culet, I don't want the culet to risk being snapped off if I can't get the dot free. So I'm going to use a small piece of my silly putty, or I guess it's modeling clay, and push that down so that the culet is going into the modeling clay and it's not going to have the super glue. So now I'm going to just put the super glue in. Let me take some of this putty out. There's too much in there. So I'm just going to put a little putty in the very bottom. Okay, so now I'll just put in, fill the little cup up with my UV activated super glue. Push the stone into it. And I want a little bit coming down the side, but not dripping like it is. And turn it over, make sure there's a little bit on the stone as well as the top. So the UV activated super glue is right. Has a nice bead all the way around it. First time I've tried a large stone with my UV activated super glue, so we'll see how it goes.
I'm cutting the first tier or row of the crown to set the girdle width. I will reduce the width of the girdle by about half of what you see here, and we'll be able to clean it up with all the remaining issues around the girdle, which I have marked in black with my Sharpie. It's starting to look good. I've cut the second tier of the crown, which levels the girdle all around. I still have a ways to go on reducing the width of the girdle, which I want to be about 0.5 millimeters. And yes, there is a lot of debate among cutters as to the perfect girdle width, with a lot of cutters using some percentage of the overall width of the stone. But for me, 0.5 millimeters for this stone is perfect. I've pre-polished the upper half, or the crown, of our Aquamarine, and I used 3000 grit diamond on a bat lap. Now we're ready to polish the upper half of the crown. The crown of our gemstone polished right up, mostly with cerium oxide on a tin lap, although I did use Spectra Ultra Laps for a couple of the facets. No problem polishing this Aquamarine, as is the case with most barrel. Barrel just polishes right up. I just cut this beautiful aquamarine gemstone into a hexagonal design. It's a very large, one-of-a-kind gemstone, and Bopie, my wife, loves the design, which again is called Conquest Ablaze. This design is not difficult to cut, and I feel that any level of gem cutter should be able to cut this design. As I said, Bopie loves this design, and she's already asked me to cut some additional gemstones using this design. Thanks, Arya. I probably won't make a video of cutting those gemstones. I do recommend that you give this design a try, and please let me know in the comments what you think of this piece of aquamarine, as well as what you think of this design, and as always, happy fastening, everyone.